The Charlotte Podcast Festival is presented by Blumenthal Performing Arts, the Queen City Podcast Network, Eclecs Creative Agency, and WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source, the home of acclaimed podcast Charlotte Talks, She Says, The List, Amplifier, Southbound, and FAQ City. Learn more about WFAE and our latest podcast, Work It, at WFAE.org. Welcome, everyone, to the Charlotte Podcast Festival. My name is Joni Deutsch. I am the podcast lead at WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source, one of the presenting organizations for the very first Charlotte Podcast Festival. In addition to being the podcast lead for WFAE, I am also the host of WFAE's award-winning Amplifier podcast, where we highlight and showcase the Charlotte music scene. And as you can probably already guess, for the next hour, I am going to be your moderator, overseeing this wonderfully talented panel of podcast speakers and helping facilitate this hour of conversation. Again, Charlotte Podcast Festival is Charlotte, North Carolina's very first podcast festival, presented by WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source, alongside the Queen City Podcast Network, the Blumenthal Performing Arts, and Eclecs Creative Agency. This is our second week of the podcast festival. If you missed out on anything from last week, or you're just new to this, welcome again. We hope to see you at further sessions. You can find the session schedule, the list of talented award-winning chart-topping speakers at charlottepodcastfestival.com. Now, of course, you're here for a reason. That reason is the title of this session. This hour session is Record from Home, Sound Like a Pro, where we'll hear some of the best tips, techniques, and tech recommendations for recording your podcast audio. The Charlotte Podcast Festival is of course, not only about information, it's about the people. It's about you, it's about creativity and the people that make these stories possible, particularly our speakers. Every speaker attached to the Charlotte Podcast Festival this year either are based in or from Charlotte and the North Carolina state. So that includes today's speakers. I hope everyone can give a round of applause to our three panelists. Andy Go is the host of The Go Show and podcast consultant for His Gojo Studios, a full-service podcast production and consulting company. Hello, Andy.
Hey, Joni. Hey, everybody tuning in.
Hello. And of course, we're also joined by two individuals in their own studio right now. We have Garrett Tishy, founder and owner of Huga Co-working, the co-working space in Charlotte that is home to a full service and very well equipped podcast studio. Hello, Garrett.
Hello.
And beside him, we have Alyssa Pressler, his colleague at Huga. She is the podcast studio manager and director of marketing at Huga Co-working. She's also the owner of the independent used bookstore, That's Novel Books, and is the host of the podcast Open Book, as well as Huga's own podcast, 0 to 10. Hi, Alyssa.
Hi, everyone.
And again, we have three talented, amazing speakers that are going to speak to the subject of recording from home, sounding like a pro. We're going to have a great conversation, and we look forward to answering your questions. If you have any questions, big, small, medium, feel free to put your questions in the comment box on Zoom. We'll get around to them towards the end of the hour. So again, any questions you have, put them in the comment section. We do ask that everyone in the audience, please make sure that your audio is muted. We're going to hear your voices in the Zoom chat box when we answer your questions, but hopefully we won't hear your audio because we want the focus to be on our speakers today. A reminder to the audience that today's session is being recorded. We are being recorded like a candid camera. So just know that this session recording will go out to you over email later this month. So keep an eye on your email inboxes. That includes your spam, your junk, your promotion folders. You want to make sure you get the recording as soon as it's made available. And as I mentioned at the beginning, Charlotte Podcast Festival is not just a week, it's a full month of session programming. Make sure to go to our website, charlottepodcastfestival.com, for the full list of sessions that you can register for free throughout the month of October. And you can support it even further by picking up one of these cozy and locally printed t-shirts. They help support our free month of podcast sessions. Order the shirt today, charlottepodcastfestival.com. You've heard enough from me, though. I'm done speaking. Let's turn it over to our very first presentation before we get into more of an audience Q&A setup. So Andy Go is going to go ahead and get us started with an idea of what are the basic tech considerations. Andy, it's your microphone.
Joni, thanks so much for having me speak here. Congratulations again on getting married this weekend. And thanks to all of you for tuning in here to the Charlotte Podcast Festival. I'm so super excited. This has been a great event. Joni's done a great job putting this together. WFAE, Queen City Podcast Network. They've all been really amazing in putting this together. So I just wanted to start by talking a little bit about some of the tips that I have for sounding good recording from home. Don't want to spend too much time on this, maybe about 15, 20 minutes at the most, and then we'll spend the rest of the time answering your questions. But here are some good tips, some good do's and don'ts, some good gear that you can use right now to sound better with your home podcast recordings. Now, I also want to say, of course, that we are in the middle of a pandemic. We don't know how much longer it's going to be like this. So recording your podcast remotely like we are via Zoom or via other means is going to be the reality of podcasting for the near future. And of course, it's something good to know even after the pandemic too. So that's our goal here with this quick little presentation, is to give you a few ideas to keep in mind whenever you're recording from home. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is I am going to share my screen. And here we are. Again, this is Record From Home, Sound Like a Pro, which, you know, I'm not surprised we have a lot of people signed up for this, because that is such an important part of putting on a podcast, is being able to record good audio from home. And most people who are podcasting aren't, you know, audio engineer experts or anything like that. But the cool thing is that you don't need to be an audio engineering expert. Oops, I just realized I'm on my last slide and not my first slide. Makes sense because they're both the same slide, so a little confusing. So let's go ahead and get started. So before you buy gear, right, before you spend a single dollar on gear that you can use to record your podcast, I want to give you some heads up about the things that are important about that gear that are actually more important than the gear itself. So as you can see here, your gear will only sound as good as the environment you place it in. So that's so super important to stress, right? If you have a $65 USB microphone, it can sound just as good or better than a $700 Neumann microphone, which is what NPR uses in their studios, if you have the right acoustics. So it's so important to make sure that you have good acoustics in whatever space that you're recording in. Now, if you're recording from home, this is going to be something like your bedroom, right? Someplace that has hopefully carpet on the floor, maybe some drapes on the walls, some fabric around to help catch the sound. Now, anytime we make sound, whether it's with our voice or, you know, when we clap our hands, sound is a vibration, right? It's the vibration moving throughout the air and bouncing off the walls in the room. And the slower that those vibrations bounce around, the better, more rich, more full that we are going to sound and our recording is going to sound. Now, if you are in a place like your bathroom, right? Something that has a lot of flat surfaces, tiles, mirrors, stainless steel, things like that, that's bad, because that's going to reflect those sound vibrations faster and more, you know, they're just going to be a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's not going to sound as good. That's what results in the thin, tinny, metallic sound that just, it sounds like we're recording in an echo chamber. So try and avoid your bathroom, try and avoid your kitchen, avoid your garage too. If you have a good bedroom or second bedroom or office like that, like I just described, that's great. But pro tip, one of the best places in your house to record, if you have it, is a walk-in closet. May sound a little strange and maybe feel a little goofy, certainly, but if you have a walk-in closet that you can use that has clothes everywhere, that's almost the perfect recording environment to record your podcast in. And if all else fails, you can always just grab a blanket and toss it over your head. There's no shame in doing that as well. Also, make sure you have good microphone technique. Uh-oh, we got somebody checking in here. Hi. So make sure you have good microphone technique, right? And this is so important. And I see this all the time with new podcasters too, just not having good, proper microphone technique. First things first, you want to be about 2 to 6 inches away from the microphone, maybe 4 to 6 inches away from the microphone. And a good rule of thumb I always use for that is to either be about a fist length away from your microphone or kind of hang loose sign away from your microphone. So about that close, or maybe about this far, about that close or this far. That's a pretty good range that's going to give you a good sound in your microphone. Most microphones, most cardioid microphones like this one are just going to pick up a little pattern that's about the size of my fist right in front of the microphone. So if you're too close, it's not going to sound good. This is the proximity effect. It's going to sound loud and bassy. And well, if you want to sound like a 1970s classic rock DJ, this is how you recreate that sound. Same thing's true if you're too far away from the microphone, right? If I start leaning back in my chair and I start getting all casual like this, which is something I see podcasters do all the time, you can clearly tell how the sound isn't as full, isn't as rich, and just isn't as good as what you want. And it's so important to be able to get that good recording, not only for you, but for your guest as well. That's the best representation of the both of you that you can get is a good quality sounding recording while you are running the tape. Also, don't forget, speak into the microphone at a 45-degree angle. You can even see what I'm doing here with my microphone here. This microphone is pointed this way naturally, and my voice is pointed this way. So I'm actually kind of speaking to it at an angle. If I were to speak directly into the microphone like this is going to allow for a lot more of those really percussive P's and T's and sibilants and S's and hard stuff like that. And that's what we don't want, right? And the reason why that happens is because when we pronounce a P or a T, we are percussively pushing out a little puff of air straight out in front of our mouths. And if we are speaking directly into the microphone, it's pushing all of that air directly into the microphone. That's going to result in more pronounced plosives, P's, T's, sibilances, than it would if you're speaking at a 45-degree angle. So if you speak at a 45-degree angle, you're actually pushing all of that air away from the microphone, but you're still in range of where the mic is picking it up. So very important, speak at a 45-degree angle. Don't get off mic. This is something I see all the time. Well, back in the days when, in the before times when we could all sit around a table and record a podcast, I'd see this all the time. I would be talking into my microphone like I am now, and then somebody over here to my left might ask me a question. And instead of just turning my head to answer that question, I see a lot of people turning completely away from their microphone. And again, you can see you can hear the difference there. It's like night and day. So don't get off microphone. Just always remember to keep your mouth, kind of at that 45-degree angle, about 2 to 6 inches away from the microphone, but don't let it get off mic because that's when you have real drops in the audio. And then of course, minimize the loud breathing, lip smacks. Some people are just more prone to breathing heavier than others. That's something that you just have to be aware of. And if you can identify that, try and minimize it as much as possible. And then finally, here's something else that really helps. Prepare what you're going to say beforehand. Even if you have good microphone technique and you have a good sounding microphone, if you are unsure of what you're going to say, if you're not confident in what you're going to say, if you're searching for the right words while you're recording, it's really going to affect the quality of what you're saying. It's going to, that lack of confidence is going to shine through in your voice. So what I always like to tell a lot of the clients that I'm working with is to script out their first 4 to 5 sentences, right? The hellos and welcome to the shows and today on our show, this is our guest and so forth. Script that stuff out because for a lot of people when they're first starting, it's hard to think of that stuff, the actual syntax, the word for word syntax of what you're going to say when you're recording. If you have that scripted out beforehand, you can be a lot more confident about reading it and then bullet pointing out your talking points and other questions after that. That allows for your natural conversational technique to shine through and take it from there. But if you really map out, if you spend a good amount of time mapping out what you're going to say in a podcast beforehand, that's going to make you more confident when you record. And yes, you can always edit out gaps and pauses and things like that. But again, that raw confidence will shine through in your voice if you're prepared. All right, let's go on to the next slide here. I'm just going to give a couple of ideas of what to look for when you're getting ready to get gear to record your podcast with. Now, don't forget that there is a wide spectrum of gear out there that you can use to record your podcast. You can use your phone if you want to, right? There is nothing wrong with just using your phone and a set of earbuds or AirPods or whatever to record your podcast. Now, of course, that limits you in not only sound quality, but how flexible you can be in recording people and all of that. So if you are wanting to step up your sound quality game and have some flexibility in how you can record, then you want to look at gear. One of the cool things about podcasting is that none of this gear is completely expensive to the point where it's out of most people's reach, right? I'm going to give you some options here for gear that you can use. Real quick, let's just start off with a laptop or desktop computer. That, of course, is pretty self-explanatory. If you have a laptop or a desktop, you can record directly into it. You can record your Zoom calls, your Skype calls, and then the file's already there on the computer, so you're ready to edit it with a DAW, a digital audio workstation of your choice. So, that's definitely a good place to start. I would also recommend a portable digital recorder. This is probably for those of you who are really going to be serious about podcasting and really, are planning on talking to multiple people, maybe in different locations. Pictured down in the bottom right corner there, you can see a Zoom H4n that's on the left and a Zoom H6. Those are both really great portable digital recorders. The only difference here is the H4n can handle two XLR microphone inputs, while the H6 can actually handle 4 microphone inputs. So it just depends on how many microphones you think you might want to use when you're working with that. But the H4n is about $225 on Amazon. The H6 is about $320, I believe. So it's not cheap. It's a little bit of an investment, but that gear will work for years. And if you're really serious about your podcasting, that's probably a direction that you would want to consider. Now, again, for most people, I would guess 75% of the people in this chat, you probably just need a good USB microphone. Now, the first USB microphone that a lot of people ask me about is the Yeti. I know, Joni, you probably get that question all the time too, or the Snowball microphone. I would not recommend those. Those are, in my experience, not well-made microphones. They also have a lot of different pickup patterns, which to me just decreases the quality of any one particular pattern. And I find the best results from USB microphones come from these microphones right here. I just want to give you a quick heads up on some of my favorite USB microphones. So on the left there, you can see the Rode NT USB. That is probably for my money, the best quality USB microphone on the market. I've got some clients who are using it, and they are just getting really fantastic results just recording in their office, in their spare bedroom and whatnot. It's $165 retail, and it also doesn't have any XLR capability, meaning that you can't plug it into a traditional mixer or one of the Zoom H4Ns or H6s. But that is a fantastic microphone I would recommend to anybody. Now, the Audio-Technica ATR 2100X and Samson Q2U are both really fantastic microphones that are very similar. They're dynamic cardioid microphones, meaning they're handheld, as you can see, which makes them very good to be portable, right? You can put that in a little pouch and carry it with you wherever you go. And really, those two microphones are pretty much identical, right? They're both the same microphone. And what makes them unique and what makes them really worthy of their recommendation here is their versatility. If you look on the right side of the screen there, that's basically a screenshot of the bottom of both of those microphones. So you can actually see the inputs that you're working with. That big round input with the 3 prongs in the middle, that's an XLR input. Again, that's a traditional microphone cable. That input is going to allow you to connect that microphone to a Rodecaster Pro, a standard mixer in a studio, or even the Zoom H4n or H6. That's fantastic, right? So that means you can use it pretty much anywhere with any studio. Now, you'll also see on the top left there, there's a mini USB output. That's fantastic too, because that allows you to plug the microphone directly into your computer, right? Directly into the USB slot in your computer. And again, that's why I recommend it for most people, because if all you want to do is record directly into your computer, these microphones will get the job done 10 out of 10 times. And it also gives you the versatility to use it with your Zoom H4 or H6 and record kind of in the field like that. The ATR 2100 is about $100, $65 for the Samson Q2U or QU2. It is a Q2U. I need to update that slide. I keep missing that. But those are really fantastic microphones. And then the last thing I would point out too is they have headphone inputs. That's the little 3.5 millimeter input that you see up in the top right of that of the microphone. That allows you to plug in a standard set of headphones like I have on now. And if you can plug your headphones into your microphone and run all your audio through one device, that really makes it very streamlined and very seamless. Oh, and here's a great pro tip too, because we're all about delivering value here at the Charlotte Podcast Festival. Any one of these setups are going to vastly improve the quality of your Zoom calls, right? So I know we're all stuck on Zoom all day long having Zoom meetings. And if you're like me, you probably get quietly frustrated with your colleagues who are just, speaking on built-in microphones and in really non-acoustically good environments. If you can set yourself up with the Samson Q2U and a set of headphones, it's going to dramatically improve your Zoom call quality. I've actually got some links that after I get done with the presentation here, I can share with everybody for this gear. Let me go back real quick and just say that headphones are important because that's how you hear what audio is being recorded, and it doesn't matter how good the audio is to your naked ear. It only matters what is actually getting on tape, and the only way you can really know that that's quality tape is with a good set of headphones. So you don't need to spend a lot of money on headphones. $20, $30 over-the-ear headphones are always really good. You don't really need much more than that. Also, if you are looking to plug multiple USB microphones into your computer, you do need an adapter like the one that you see there. There's a little bit of a process to plug in multiple USB microphones. If anybody's interested in that, we can talk more about that in the Q&A session. And then finally, like I said, if you're in a pinch, a set of AirPods or earbuds will work just fine. Also for your guest as well, they probably won't have fancy recording equipment like this. So if you can have them beforehand, just get in a good acoustically sound environment with a set of AirPods or earbuds, that's going to be better than using the built-in microphone on your computer as well. And real quick, because I don't want to run over my time here, I'm just going to shout out the Rodecaster Pro. That is this was released in 2019 as the first kind of consumer grade stereo mixer specifically made for podcasters. You can actually see it in the Huga studio there. That's what they use over in the Huga studio, is a Rodecaster Pro as well. I'm using one here myself. It really is a phenomenal piece of recording gear that if you are really serious about your podcast and your podcasting, then you'll want to, then that's a good investment. Garrett, do you want to just speak real quick about why the Rodecaster works for you and for Huga?
Sure. Yeah. So when we had first opened the studio years ago, we had went with a far more what people would consider a professional setup. We had a separate mixer, separate compressors, all run through a Zoom recorder, and we found that while the equipment was robust and you could do a ton with it, that most people were ending up with poor quality audio because they couldn't manage the sheer capability of it all. It wasn't as simple as, we kind of wanted this motto where you could like, what was it? Turn on, turn up, talk. Yes. Was kind of this motto that we had. Like, how vast majority of people coming through the studio are new or rookie or amateur. How do we get them in here, give them the best quality audio, and not have to have them spend 30 minutes running tests to ensure that their audio is not garbage?
Right.
So yeah, when we switched to the Rodecaster Pro, we basically eliminated the vast majority of all audio issues. That even somebody that's never recorded audio can step into the studio within 5 minutes, understand how to use this equipment, and be recording quality audio. It's Andy, these are still $599, $600.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Right about that price point.
I think it is the single greatest value in the last 4 years of dealing with studio equipment. It's unreal that this is a $600 item.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, And I would say exactly what Garrett touched on is the main reason why I want to shout that out. It's made for those of us who don't have audio engineering degrees and those who just want to be able to record good quality stuff, have a lot of different options. It's Bluetooth compatible. You can program sounds into it. It looks cool. Well, ask Apple how good well-designed materials work. And it's just so easy to use for anybody who just wants to get in and record. So we can talk more about that in the Q&A session. Just wanted to shout out the Rodecaster is a fantastic piece of gear. Real quick, just wanted to shout out my favorite softwares for recording remotely. Zoom, obviously, we're all familiar with. That's really easy to record with, even in the free version. Zencastr is also a fantastic software that is free on both ends to use. Check out Zencastr. There's the version right now doesn't include video, which is, I think, a good thing because you don't always need video when you're recording. And then finally, Squadcast is out there too. I actually haven't used it. It's expensive. I don't know what it provides besides that the Zoom and Zencastr don't. But I do have it on recommendations from some people that I trust that the sound quality is really worth it. The user interface is really good too. I just haven't used it because it costs money. And then finally, to edit your podcast, here are the three softwares that I would really look at first if you're getting into editing your podcast. Audacity is free. That's for Windows and PC. Fantastic software that any podcaster should have. If you're working on a Mac, GarageBand is really great software. That's, of course, a free download, too, if you don't already have it. And check it out this Wednesday, shameless plug. I will be running a GarageBand 101 session for this here Charlotte Podcast Festival. That session is coming up Wednesday at either noon or 1 o'clock. I can't remember which. But please check that out if you are interested in GarageBand. And then finally, Adobe Audition, which is what I use. That's a little bit more professional level software that's made for radio and dialogue production. It's an industry standard that you can find in pretty much any studio, especially since the Adobe suite is so prevalent with all of its other software capabilities. If you have the time and the money and the willingness to learn, Adobe Audition is probably the place I would go with your recording software. That's it for me. I want to turn it back over to Joni and answer some questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy. So I'm going to go ahead and let's move myself and also Garrett and Alyssa to the panel floor. So again, everyone who has been just joining us very recently, this is the hour where we are talking about how to record from home, sound like a pro. I'm your moderator, Joni Deutsch. We were just hearing from Andy Go, who is a podcast consultant in the Charlotte, North Carolina region and area. We're just hearing all these different tips for how you can record from home, not having to invest a ton of money or a ton of time in making your audio sound amazing. That's just a key note here for everyone, is that whatever your resource level is, whatever you want to put into your podcast idea, if it's a passion project or if you want to turn this into a full-time career, you can do this. You just need to decide how much you want to invest in and also how much you want to experiment and grow into. Maybe it's not necessary for you to invest millions of dollars at the outset when you're just starting to learn. Maybe you want to start with some free software or free programs or equipment and then build up from there step by step. The important thing is that you just take a step and continue walking or running in that direction. So Andy, thank you for your presentation. For those wondering, the session today is being recorded. We are going to send it out at the end of this month. So make sure to keep an eye on your emails. We will send out the recording later this month. And now what we're going to do is we're going to talk to Garrett Tishy and also Alyssa Pressler. They are with Huga Co-working here in the Charlotte area. We're going to talk to them about their studio setup, which they're actually broadcasting live from right now. So Andy, we're going to move you to the wings. We'll see you in a little bit for the Q&A in just about 10-20 minutes. Bye. And Garrett and Alyssa, thank you for joining us. So for those who don't know what Huga is or what even the name means, tell us a little bit about your work and what you do in Charlotte.
You want to take that one? Awesome. Okay. So Huga is a co-working space. Essentially, we provide space for entrepreneurs, remote workers, nonprofits, people who just want to have a side gig or work on a project after 9 to 5 to get work done without having to pay traditional office space prices. And with that, we do also have a podcast studio. It's one of the amenities we offer. We rent out our podcast studio for $15 an hour, so we try and keep it as accessible as possible to the public. I know that was something you touched on when we were kind of preparing for the session. This is really all about how to keep podcasting accessible, and that's something we're really committed to, in my opinion, here. Not everyone, even starting out, has the ability to just even drop a couple $100s on a microphone or something like that. And it's really about where you want to start and how quickly you want to jump in. So I think most people coming through our studio space are people who want to start, want to kind of dip their toes in the water, aren't really sure how far their podcast is going to go. And we can be an option for folks who are just looking to get started and try some easy stuff, and then maybe further down the line say, I want to really commit to this and buy my own Rodecaster and buy my own Zoom recorder and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's something to note for everyone here. And I know we have individuals that are from the Charlotte area, that are from the States, that are from different countries. There are affordable options for you if you don't want to invest in the equipment to own immediately. Co-working spaces around the country, around the world, some of them may have podcast studios like what Huga Co-working in Charlotte, North Carolina has. And if they don't, if those co-working spaces don't have it, it's a good opportunity for you to go to them and say, hey, podcasting is becoming a thing. Obviously, a Charlotte Podcast Festival shows that there are 10,000 individuals wanting to learn. Is this something that the co-working space could invest in, to have a studio built for co-working people to do a rental or monthly subscription to? To that note, so Garrett, tell us a little bit about why it was important for you all to have a podcast studio in particular, because Huga Co-working has been around for a little bit of time now.
Sure. So this was a bit of a personal passion project for myself. I think that audio learning is the best form of learning. I don't make a ton of time to read or sit down, but I find that I can always have my headphones in, listening to something in most cases, no matter what I'm doing outside of having a conversation. So when I opened this and wanted to go after it, it was really just about lowering the bar. Audio, people want us to charge more money, and I just thought, how can we just help people get up and running and sharing and creating with the greatest of ease?
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of the shows that don't last coming out of here, maybe record once, twice, maybe 3 times, and then they disappear. And I feel comfortable that the reason that they don't continue is nothing to do with equipment or the studio or the cost of doing this. It's purely them taking a chance on creating something and then maybe just not finding their foothold. And yeah, it's really about accessibility. I think that there's so much to learn. I listen to podcasts in every genre, and I'm fascinated by it. I think it's really cool. And I also love listening to people. I think there's something about the amount you can learn by really honing in on somebody's tone and voice. I'm fascinated by it.
So that's actually a great point that I'm getting in the comments, and something we've talked about last week at the podcast festival is accessibility and cost for things. And really great comments in the Zoom chat that your library systems out there, we definitely have a great one in Charlotte, North Carolina. There are podcast kits and a podcast studio that you can basically rent out or take up with a library card. So that's another option for everyone out there. Look to your local libraries, look to those university systems, and see if maybe you can just like you would a book, you can check out a podcast kit for a certain amount of time, experiment with it, try it out. In terms of, Huga Co-working, which we have 2 individuals from today, Alyssa Pressler and Garrett Tishy, tell us a little bit about the pricing structure in terms of people wanting to come in, because you have hundreds of people, hundreds of podcasters that are using or have used a podcast studio there.
Yeah, $15 an hour, flat. It hasn't gone up. It's been the same price for as long as I can remember. We charge for training, so we have a required 30-minute training session with Taylor to just kind of familiarize you with Huga and the studio. You pay for that session, and then we give you that $15 back for your first session.
Yeah.
And that's really to hold people accountable for the training and showing up for something. And then hopefully that pushes them to use their free session to record once. There's no other cost associated with it. We don't require a membership. It's purely a la carte. And again, that goes to accessibility. We just, every time we've brought up doing some sort of paid membership, it never makes sense, and just giving people the freedom to get in and out as they need.
Yeah.
And how does that compare? So you said $15 per month. How does that compare to other co-working spaces or other institutions you've seen with rentals for podcast studios? Is that less, more, around the same? For people in the audience who may be wondering how much, if they do get in that direction, how much they should pay for it?
I'm not going to speak to specifics on other spaces outside of it. I've seen wildly more expensive. I've seen studios that come with full production needs covered, humans that you can rent as a part of it. Like, people ask us all the time if I can sit in and produce, and the answer is no, we don't want to provide those things. We purely want to provide space that feels good, that works consistently, that people can feel comfortable coming and recording, and also bringing their guests.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And we actually, we'll get into audience Q&A in a broader sense in just a little bit, but we have a question from Tana, who I think it really relates to this conversation with Hygge Co-working, which has a podcast studio. We're obviously in a pandemic. It's one of the reasons why we're doing the Charlotte Podcast Festival virtually and not in person. We want to provide knowledge, but also want to be mindful of health and safety concerns. So Tana had a question in our comments of how are you social distancing in current health environment? What are you doing differently to allow for podcasters to be able to use the studio space?
Yeah, so I think it's been a slow ramp up for us. We did completely shut the studio down for quite a bit here over the summer. We have brought it back, and there are a lot more rules and regulations in place to ensure that it's as safe a space as possible. We only allow 4 people in the studio at a time. The room could hold more than that, but at this point we're only allowing 4. Anytime they enter the space, they must be wearing a mask. They can take the mask off in the studio with their guests if they are comfortable, but they don't have to. Some people don't and record the entire time with the mask on. We have sanitizing spray that people are required to sanitize the table, the equipment, the mics, everything before and after they podcast. We also have sanitizer in here. We go through and sanitize it. We have a cleaning crew that comes through and sanitizes it. Yeah. There's a lot of sanitizing.
Now, I've seen some podcasters that have actually put the basically like a mask, I wouldn't say a mask, but a little bag on top of the microphone just to kind of protect it even further. Is that something that you all have been doing in your physical podcast studio setup?
We are not bagging the mics,
okay.
But we are spraying the mics with a kind of this 4-minute disinfectant that just sits on it and kills everything after each session.
Yep.
And so far, so good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and we have
4 months now, and it's been okay so far.
That's great. And we have a question, or actually a comment here from Stefan in the comments saying that he would bring his own windscreen to a studio just to put on top of the microphone, which I think is a good call out. Thank you, Stephen.
Totally.
So let's just do really quickly with Garrett and Alyssa joining us from Hygge Co-working, literally joining us from Hygge Co-working in Charlotte, North Carolina. Since we have you on screen, tell us a little bit about the space. What are you seeing? What are the things that a person should expect, or things that they can bring to their own home studio space based off what you all have done there?
Sure.
Yeah, so I think that this is like such a weird thing, and mainly because I think that, and this doesn't diminish what we've built here, but it's built to be really simple. And I think that the moment that you go, if you're an iPhone recorder, you record at home, there's something about sitting in a studio that feels so incredibly legit. Like, I know I have, we have large audience podcasters that have never recorded in a studio that have finally shifted over here, and they walk in and they almost feel like a certain sense of pride that they're taking a step to, maybe it feels a little more serious. Maybe it feels like you're paying the guests that you have coming to record with you a little bit more respect. Like, you brought them to this cool space. Obviously home recording, if you can do it well and have great quality sound, like you're great. And I think there's nothing, in my opinion, will ever replace sitting across from your guest and having that conversation. Like, I even podcasts that I've recorded remote from home during the pandemic, I always FaceTime with those people because I want to see them. I love that human connection that you get is important. It's something that obviously we built a co-working space that's around in real life interaction. So that's just important, and that's what you can expect when you step into the space. It's so important to me, and I think it's essential.
And in terms of basic setup, just really quickly, what are the basic tech or the basic things that you can find in your studio at Hygge?
Yeah, so we are a simple, we are a Rodecaster, the Rode Procaster
Rodecaster Pro.
Rodecaster Pro every time. And we have Rode mics. Like we are like, I don't know if Alyssa wants to.
There's our
around.
setup. Yeah, I'll pan around a little.
Thank you, Alyssa.
It's 4 mics, a Rode Caster Pro, and that's it. Like we have Sony MD5 headsets.
Yep.
Everything sounds phenomenal, and I've challenged myself to, because I've listened to a lot of the audio that people release coming out of here, and it sounds damn good.
Yeah.
And the microphones that you're using, what kind are they again?
They're Rode
The
mics.
Rode.
Okay.
Yep. Same ones that Andy suggested. So a lot of his suggestions are ones that we have right here in the studio. I'd say another thing to keep in mind as you're getting set up is to, again, create a cozy space. I think it makes all the difference when you come in and you feel comfortable and at home, but also feel a level of professionalism. I don't know if I, like, sitting in my closet necessarily would produce as good of content on the podcast that I'm a part of as if I were sitting in here, or even just at home but had a specific setup for podcasting. It's almost like a home office, you know, versus working on your couch. Having a home setup versus sitting in your closet, if you are able to do that.
Yeah, it feels a bit like, as you can tell, like our lighting is dark in here. It's very intentionally built to be kind of, we have this dark wood wall. It feels like a kitchen table, a dark rug. Just our chairs are bright, but it's meant to kind of give this like chill vibe. Like we find that our guests and people that step into the studio are a bit more warm coming into this vibe, and that's important to us.
Yes.
Great. So why don't we go ahead? We have about 17 minutes left in this hour. I want to be mindful of time, and I want to be mindful of the hundreds of questions and comments we're getting in about this particular session topic. So we're going to do Q&A with the audience right now. A reminder to the audience, of course, today's session is being recorded. We will send it out at the end of the month, so make sure to keep an eye on your emails for this session recording, an email including your spam junk promotions folder, because it could end up there. And we'll try to get through as many questions as possible. Also, this week is all about editing and recording audio, great sound. So make sure at the Charlotte Podcast Festival website, you look at this entire week of sessions. We have ones devoted to common audio mistakes, audio editing software platforms like Adobe Audition, Hindenburg, GarageBand, even music. So make sure you register. The sessions are all free and open to the public because of your support, because you can also pick up a t-shirt that can help us keep these free and accessible. So time for the questions now. We have a question coming in. It's actually kind of relevant to what the Huga co-working podcast space is. This question is from Allison, and it's about foam versus fabric soundproofing. So Andy, you can chime in here, but thoughts about how to make sure that you're soundproofing your space so that you're not getting as much of an echo effect when you're recording.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So we have, I think, 9-foot drop ceiling in here, so acoustic tiling, and then we actually have no foam padding anywhere in this room.
Yep.
We have a large carpet on the floor, pretty low pile, a soft wood back wall that you can kind of see here that is just textured enough, and 2 soft chairs in the far corner with like a shag carpet, and that's it. And we find that we get little to no room echo, sound, anything, and also nothing coming out of the hallway of the podcast studio.
Yeah.
I mean, out of the co-working space. It is, it's a feat of engineering that I'm desperate to not put padding all over the walls, and somehow we've lucked out with just the right textures. Yeah.
Andy, do you have any other thoughts about soundproofing and maybe what you've done with studio spaces or at home studios?
Sure. Definitely. One thing that I would consider is just that most home podcasters are not going to be able to recreate good quality NPR, level recordings. I mean, Joni, you've been to those studios in DC, and it's so quiet in a recording studio like that the silence is actually eerie. It's an unsettling feeling to be in a space that acoustically sound. So most people just aren't going to be able to recreate that. And I think that if you can get to a certain level where you don't have the HVAC running in the background and you don't have massive echoes and all of that, then you're probably okay, right? Again, the nature of podcasting is DIY. As such, a lot of people are not going to be working with the best quality audio all the time. And I would say from my experience, 96% of people listening to podcasts really probably can't tell the difference between, a $700 microphone and a $50 microphone if the effects are the same and everything else is standard. So I would say give yourself a little bit of grace when it comes to your audio quality. Do not let your audio quality stop you from recording and publishing your podcast. If you're stopping yourself because you're like, I don't have NPR level quality, well, then you're stopping yourself for the wrong reason, because almost nobody has that quality.
Yeah, just to echo that, and to what Garrett and Alyssa were just sharing, a public radio or NPR studio is set up in a way where it's not meant to be cozy and comfortable in a way that you'd like to lounge around all day. I mean, if you want to, you could. I wouldn't necessarily. So just know, what is the space that you're trying to create? What is the audio sound quality that you're trying to make sure you get when you are starting to edit in a DAW? So definitely some good considerations there. A question here about lavalier mics. We've gotten a couple of them in the comments, which again, everyone feel free to continue your questions in the comment section below. Christina had a question about lavalier mics, and she's asking for advice on that versus a USB mic on avoiding that kind of rustling sound from clothing. So just generally, lavalier mics, thoughts on that?
So a quick thing, I have experience on both sides. I like them if you have someone behind producing or can watch levels or tell you what's actually pumping into the board. That's essential, because the moment that they shift, start rustling, or even I find that they can be really sensitive, where if they're right here, they're great, but if they're down slightly or even pinned, I have recorded many of things where the audio has not come out right. Mm-hmm. And that's, to me, just a risk. I think there's nothing sadder than having to re-record something that might have come off so well, so passionate, so perfect. So just consider that they come with some, while you're untethered, you can come with a lot of risks in quality, personally.
Andy, do you have any thoughts about lavalier mics?
Yeah, I generally try to stay away from lavalier mics. They, same sort of thing. I just don't find the sound qualities all that great. It's certainly not going to be better than a good, USB microphone like the ones that I showed you. The only reason I would use it is maybe if there was some sort of video application involved. But even then, having a good USB microphone set up, still looks professional and fun, just like this setup does right here. So I'm not usually a fan of lavaliers.
Okay, so on that note then, a different kind of microphone setup, the headset mic, which is actually one that I'm using today simply for comfort reasons and ease of use. Thoughts about headphone microphones or setups that anyone could use during, especially the pandemic?
Yeah, if you have those headsets that have the microphone attached to them like that, like a broadcast headset.
My hair's in the way, but there you go.
Oh,
My
okay,
hair is hiding it.
You didn't know that. Yeah, no, definitely. Actually, I really like that as an alternative to your kind of hands-free lavalier microphone, because that allows you to be, turning your head and doing whatever else. It's good for other guests. And as long as the audio coming in from the microphone sounds good, usually that's my rub with things like that, is the microphones aren't usually as good. But as long as you have a good sounding quality that sounds good to your ears, then you should be fine. That's one other thing that I would love to stress here too, is that you really need to trust your ears on this one. You don't necessarily need validation from people like myself or Garrett or Joni or Alyssa. If it sounds good to your ears, then chances are it probably sounds good.
Actually, Andy, a follow-up for you. We've gotten a few questions in the comments about what microphone you're using right now for today's session. Tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. I'm using a MXL BCD1. MXL is the brand. The BCD1 is the model, and it's just a really solid USB dynamic microphone. I really like this. In fact, I found out about this at a podcasting conference that I was at last year when I got to talk to some of the gear distributors, and this was the microphone that just everybody who came up to the booth, they have like 5 microphones lined up so you can all test them out. But this was the one that I think everybody was really all about. And also it's a dynamic microphone. It's not a condenser. I don't know if we want to get into the difference between those two, but dynamic microphones are a little bit simpler to use. They are more they're more forgiving too. They are not quite as sensitive. Condenser microphones, which is what you would find in a studio like NPR, they're super sensitive, meaning that if you don't have a really good acoustic environment, then it's probably not as good of an idea to use that as it would be a dynamic microphone.
And Andy, one more time, can you share again what the type of microphone you're using for people in the comments?
Sure. The brand is the MXL, and the brand is MXL. They are a fantastic manufacturer of microphones of all types. And the model is the BCD1. Oops.
Great.
That's BCD exclamation point that I just put in the chat.
Great. So thoughts for Hugo about your space. Is there anything that you would want to work on to make it even better, or to accommodate for a different kind of podcasting crew or setup moving forward?
So we're actually considering building a second studio that's centered around an even more comfortable setup. So maybe more relaxed lounge seating with mics on stands that could be moved around, just less of a chair and tables kind of feel and more of a fireside chat type feeling.
Yeah.
I think the equipment would remain mostly the same. Like, this stuff has worked for us for years now, and I just don't see switching it up. It works, but the environment to us is important. I think that, again, in this era, in this post-COVID or current COVID situation, people are only really venturing in when they really want to get guests in front of the mic, or they have multiple people and everyone doesn't have the means to record. I'd just like to give people multiple environments.
I'd say too, a lot of the podcasters, or a good portion of the podcasters who use our space, are also doing video podcasts, and that's one of the benefits that our space allows, is it's a little more of a professional setup. So we do, again, get those questions a lot, like, can I move the table? Can I, I want a podcast, but I want to do it in the cozy chairs. We're not really able to do that right now, but with a different setup in a different environment, I think that could be something you could explore in the future.
Yeah. Something for the audience. We talked a little bit about lavalier mics, and then Alyssa just mentioned video podcasting. We do have a session devoted to video podcasting 101. It's for this week, Wednesday, October 14th at 7 p.m. Eastern. So feel free to register and save your seat for that. We'll be getting into video podcasting basics, including the sound of video. A question here for Andy. We're getting a lot of these questions. I know you put a little bit of an answer in the comments, but just share a little bit more about your thoughts on uni versus bi versus omnidirectional microphones, and then also why you just dearly detest the Yeti microphone of all of them.
For sure. So there's a bunch of different types of microphones out there that have all different purposes and uses, and really they're very distinct. And so one of the reasons why I always recommend these dynamic or cardioid microphones is because they're really meant for just picking up individual person's speeches. The issue with the Yeti is that they have a bunch of different pickup patterns. They have an omnidirectional pattern, which picks up everything around the room, which you would think would be good, except that picks up, well, everything around the room, including the air conditioner and the dog barking and everything else going on. They've got these other different sort of pickup patterns, which are just really kind of weird, and you really don't need to use most of the time. And having those different settings, I believe it just kind of decreases the quality all the way around, right? I'm always wary of things that say they are all in one, right? Like an all-terrain tire does not exist that is both good in the snow and handling corners at 90 miles an hour. It just doesn't exist. Those are two different types of tires. And if you have a tire trying to do both, then you have a tire that's probably not good at doing either one of those things. Same thing with microphones. You want one good microphone that's specialized in what it does. These dynamic microphones are just really good at what they do. I also put this in the chat too. They're really good at not picking up ambient sound, right? If the whole pickup pattern is basically this size, then it's not going to pick up stuff going on all the way around it. So it's good for, people recording at home offices and things like that. Yeah, the Yeti, and they're like the Yeti is like $165, I think. Like, that's way too expensive for what it is. It looks a lot cooler than the sound it delivers. But if you ask me, a good, USB microphone also looks pretty cool and sounds much better.
Folks, we're getting towards the end of this session. We're going to try to answer a couple more questions. Feel free to stay with us because this next question is going to be really relevant to, I think, everyone going through pandemic mode. We've been getting a couple questions about remote guest setup. In the case of, you have a guest that's not able to come to see you, or you're able to come to see them because of pandemic and social distancing. So what are ways to be able to conduct that interview with the best audio possible, and also make them feel comfortable as you're not really in a physical space with them and have to kind of get that personal connection going during the interview?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Andy and we are going to agree on this. I think that's why we love the Rodecaster. You can connect via Bluetooth for your phone or your laptop to the Rodecaster and still get pretty great sound quality, which is fabulous. It's one of the reasons we went with this system, and I'm sure that's why Andy uses it as well. Just makes virtual podcasting a little bit easier. In terms of getting folks comfortable, honestly, that's something you'll need to do with in-person guests as well as virtual guests as a podcast host. I think that's all about your personality. Joni is a fabulous example today of a moderator who can make anything feel comfortable and very conversational. And that's a skill that I don't know if you can teach. I think it's just something you pick up over time or you have naturally.
And that's very sweet of you to say, Alyssa. And I will say, yes, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So that's why the recommendation is start somewhere and keep going at the rate that you feel comfortable with, because the more you do it, the easier it's going to be, the better it's going to sound, the more comfortable you're going to feel when doing it. This time next year, you're going to be like a pro, but you just have to start now. Andy, thoughts on how to get clean audio remotely? What are the systems or software apps you'd recommend so that you can get really seamless audio, really great audio?
Sure. Well, again, if we're recording remotely, probably the number one thing that you have to deal with is a good internet connection. And so if you can have a wired internet connection, that really makes a world of difference, because it doesn't matter if you're using Zoom or Squadcast or whatever. If your internet is choppy, then you're going to have some issues. And unfortunately, I live in an old house and I've got, not the best internet setup here. So hopefully I've been coming through clear this whole time. But make sure you have a good internet connection, first of all. And then I would say, outside of the things that we've already talked about, like having them be in a good acoustically sound environment, having a decent enough microphone or AirPods or anything like that, one thing that you can do is talk about your questions beforehand with your guest. And that kind of does the same thing that I was talking about how when you go into your podcast, you want to have a roadmap of where you want to go with your conversation. If you say 24 hours or something like that before you're recording, sit down with your guest or email them beforehand and say, hey, here's the questions that we're going to ask. Here's the talking points that we're going to have. That gives them the ability to think of their answer beforehand. So, if you bring somebody on cold and you ask them a question, they might have to think about it for a second. Even if it's somebody who really knows their stuff and is prepared for these sorts of things, it's still, off the cuff in a certain sense. But if they have a day to really consider what their answers are, when you ask that question, boom, they're going to know exactly what they want to say beforehand. And being so confident in your voice and where you're going with your conversation, that always leads to a better conversation on the microphone, in my opinion.
Absolutely. That's the biggest advice I give, is always over-prepare. Over-prepare yourself, over-prepare your guests, especially if you're doing it remotely and you're not going to be in person with them. Send them a document in advance that goes through step by step. Step 1, make sure you have your computer up. Step 2, here's the program that you need to click on or the app that you need to download for that device. Step 3, make sure you're wearing a headset or a pair of earbuds or you're in a quiet room. Definitely walk them through. And if you need to call them in advance of that interview to make sure you walk through it with them over the phone so they understand, or they have any questions, you can immediately address it. Do that. It's better to just go ahead and be over-prepared than be under-prepared or have to pivot really quickly because of an issue popping up. So folks, I have to say, I'm sorry that it's 101. It is an hour And we've done this session. This is great. We've had so many questions. I know we couldn't get around to all of them. So here's what I would recommend to the audience. Thank you so much again for being here. If you have additional questions that you'd like answered, I'd highly recommend reaching out to Andy Go and also to Garrett and to Alyssa. You can find their information on our website, which is charlottepodcastfestival.com. Just click the little tab that says speakers. Of course, this is not the first and it's not the last session of our Charlotte Podcast Festival. We have a full month of programming. This week in particular is dedicated to audio editing and recording and great audio. Andy's actually doing another session this week about audio editing software, so make sure you register. It is free. It's all virtual. Go ahead and register right now. Space is limited. We want to make sure you get into the session. This session, of course, was recorded. We will send it out at the end of the month when the festival is over. So keep an eye on your email inboxes, including your spam, your junk, your promotions folder for the recordings. And of course, we hope that you enjoyed today's session. You share about it on social media. Let the world know that they can attend and learn from the same sessions that you're becoming a pro at. You can hashtag it CLT Podcast Fest. Again, that's hashtag CLT Podcast Fest, and register for the sessions and support the sessions by picking up a brand new locally produced in Charlotte soft t-shirt at charlottepodcastfestival.com. It allows for us to continue these free and virtual trainings for the world to enjoy and see. Let's give one more big round of applause virtually or even just with the video to Garrett and also to Alyssa and to Andy for joining us today. Thank you all so much for your insight. Obviously the audience appreciated it and I also appreciated it too.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Joni.
Thank you. And again, thank you to everyone who's joining us for this hour. We have so many more sessions lined up. We hope to see you more later this month and this Friday at our virtual happy hour where you can mix and mingle with other podcasters and podcast fans. You can register for that right now at charlottepodcastfestival.com for this Friday night. I've been your moderator, Joni Deutsch. I hope to see you all very soon in podcast land. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Monday and we'll chat real soon. Bye, everyone.